In the last month or so, I had lots of interesting learning that I picked up, and I made voice memos for all of them, maybe 15 of them. In the last week, I found more interesting videos from the YouTube, and I summarized those at my page called May All Beings Be Happy. There are 4 posts: Friedman, Sinclair, Tolley, Sam Harris, and more Tolley. And there's fascinating stories from all of them. And it's very interesting that they came out as if I used the YouTube and Google and they read my mind to predict or what I'm interested in. So many of them came out very quickly, one after the other. And having that on my lap and trying to summarize, which is a crazy thing to do, because there are so many wonderful stories and ideas in there. But what I could do is just a random thought here. Because the beginning of this month-long interesting journey I had was basically talking about lots of random thought, but there's a theme behind it. Just like AI has a theme that they can find. Out of lots of the spiritual or scientific or AI related topics, there's something down deep fascinating me. And I want to capture it, but I don't think there's any easy way, as Tolley says, that the words are just the signpost. But still, I have this desire of trying to capture this moment, which I think was very important for my own growth at the age of 73. If I were to choose one word that I was thinking about, it will be there's absolute and there's relative. Absolute is the way things are as it is, and the relatives are typically things in the mind. The mind can distinguish good and bad, dualistic view, and therefore you have this ego or some identity trying to figure out what to be done. Even writing the sentence or doing this voice memo requires some thought behind it, and the mind is the medium to do that. Except the point of this discussion is not about the mind by itself, but the words and the sentences, the logics that is in the mind need to be reflected on, if I call it, the absolute or state of being, which is beyond the mind conceptual understanding. So there are so many ways to look at this, and I feel all the videos I've been posting is about the same theme. Trying to capture the things that I learn and pick up the wisdom and all that in some way or the other in the voice memo or YouTube. And all of that is just pointing something which the essence of what it is versus what the mind is talking about it. So there's always a paradox of trying to capture something which is absolute or something fundamental by the use of the logic and the word. It's difficult and it cannot do it, but that's what it is. And I noticed that Eckhart Tolle was doing the same thing. He's got, I don't know, maybe hundreds, thousands of the videos talking about the same issue, all from different angles. And I have been doing the same thing in my whole life, probably, and more recently with this, the last, I don't know, several years on the YouTube to capture the essence or the wisdom that I feel as I live my life. So each of them, they're like probably 200 videos I posted or close to that. And it may seem very random, but there's some theme behind it, underneath it. And I'm just getting the core of this, the feeling I have, bombarded with all the thoughts and also related to my being quiet and calm in my being here and rainy and weather perhaps is affecting that I'm spending more time to watch some of the YouTube videos and then maybe contemplate and get the sense out of it. So again, this is the random, but what I'm doing here is just a random thought. But there's a theme behind it, and the whole effort of this random talk is about the theme, which is the origin of who we are, or the base, or the source of all this amazing stuff that happens in the world and the universe. So if we connect to that, then you have this sense of amazing being state, and that's what this whole videos that I'm capturing pointing to. So by now, nobody can understand what I'm talking about probably, but I have posted many of them in my page. As I said, may all beings be happy, and I will post that URL, whatever, that the website, the information. So if people are interested, today is June 12th, I think, 2021, and all of those, 8 of them, maybe more than that, is posted there. And if anybody is interested, please take a look, because that's the whole point of my coming to this point, that I wanted to capture the essence of it. So one thought I can have is that organization and clarity. There are lots of information, like on my computer, so many files here and there, so many YouTube things, and my 15 or so voice memos not processed yet, which are basically the content of my mind, captured in some form or the other. And it need to be processed in real life, not left on the YouTube as it is, as the information or the knowledge. But wisdom is a wisdom to be processed and appreciated as we live. So the point of this randomness of the files and all that information comes to the point of execution of it. And that's the moment-to-moment practice, because that's the way that we live. As Eckhart Tolle talked about the power of now, I think, the state of being, here we are. And what is that process going on at this life, at this moment? The bottom line is that the mind may have those ideas, may have wisdom in it, but the whole thing is to process that in each moment. So one way I can think is that mind needs to be better organized so that the things can be clarified and explained, like Eckhart Tolle talks about, and others, scientists and the AI and all that, is trying to capture the essence of it by the equation or some kind of a discovery point. But all of that, again, come back to the point of our life here and now, and how we make that wisdom to be appreciated in executing or processing and connecting ourselves, being at the state of this foundation of where we are. So already I may be losing myself, or if there's anyone listening, it may not be making any sense out of it, but that's the absolute point of being that I wanted to capture. And with that, and not losing that, and being able to connect to that, even using our mind, we may be distracting ourselves to somewhere else, the delusion, going to the past or going into the future, why this, why that, and what can be done. And the mind is such a tool that we want to use well, but how we use it, that's the basis of this. What is this absolute way of being connected to how we use our mind? And the simple way of saying is that not just the organizing the information in a coherent manner, but making the judgment at the point when the mind moves, so that the mind can distract us from going to the direction of right or left. And when we get involved too much into any direction the mind moves, then we may lose the foundation or connection to the origin or the basis of who we are. That's the deep root of our existence, our being, that it's happening this whole point of time called now, manifesting, and that is going on all the time. That's the eternal now of how things are happening in this whole universe, and we are just swimming in there. Except as we swim in that ocean, the waves picked up, and that's the mind. And we get captured in the mind and trying to do the surfing or figuring out which way to go and not get drowned or anything like that. But we are always connected at the root, which is the ocean itself. So not losing the core of who we are, but being able to navigate, utilizing the mind so that we can be not losing ourselves in the mind, but rather to be with the mind, real time, making a good judgment so that we don't get thrown out into the delusion or suffering, unnecessary suffering. There could be a pain and physical problem, but more into this delusion, the suffering in the mind, caused by the mind. And I waste lots of time. If I look at my computer, like I said, there are many files and they get lost, and I have two computers and two phones. I finally managed to make two phones to one, and there are lots of protocols of the processes and files going back and forth, and you lose it. I just spend maybe 20 minutes figuring out where I put the file and all of that. And we use lots of energy figuring out where's the information, what's the knowledge, how does it connect to each other, not just on the computer, but in our mind. And my main point related to that is that that has to be simplified. If I look at the mastery of any skill, the person who masters has the very well organized way of approaching whatever that is. That is the concern, that is the interest, that is the activity that the master is involved in. And this basic level of the skills that I guess I'm talking about is the skill of how to use your mind and not get lost, and be connected to the mind in the proper manner so that I don't get lost. And to not get lost, we have to have a file organized and also throw away the files, which is the pieces in the mind, which to be evaluated and thrown out when it's not meaningful for life. Because if we are just processing the information back and forth and getting lost, and if that's whole life of our being, then where is it? How do you spend your time? Where is the sense of appreciation of being alive? Instead of chasing and refiling and organizing, which may be necessary, but there must be a good way to have the connection to the absolute, as I call it, the way of being, so that I'm at peace. And that's the whole point, having a peace, total peace of being. And if we lose that, life is gone. Gone into where? It's in the knowledge in the mind. It's just playing in the mind. It's what we think is the life is, but it's just the mind play. There's a danger of getting lost in thinking. So how do we deal with it? That's the theme. And if we can ride on the process of using the mind in a manner that is connected to the root, the way of nature, if I may say so, how the universe is functioning, then we are aligned. But if we are not aligned and connected, then we are lost in the mind. So how do we detect that when we lose it? That's the very essence of this life that we need to be careful at. And if you find the alignment and the connection, then you have a peace. You find yourself at home, so to speak. The home is your being. And I posted the video about like melting into nature. It's one of them. I talked about the two universes, the mind universe and whatever is outside of it, or including the mind, but the whole universe behind it. And if we lose that, if we lose the nature of that connection, then we are in the artificial level of the mind play, and that's just the mind, like a computer processing it, file rearranging it, and spending all my life, lots of time to play in the mind and getting lost and then reorganize it. But what is the principle of organizing it? We are pushing ourselves to organize for some reason, but what you get out of it, money, fame, whatever, is that the purpose of it? And when you get it, what happens? Well, we may be just chasing without knowing what we are doing, but just chasing the things can happen sometime when you get there. But when you get there, there's another chase you start to happen. We know that. When you achieve something, is that the end of it? No. When you organize things, is that the end of it? No. When you found the solution, is that the end of it? No. When you have the wisdom, is that the end of it? No. That we are to live our life not losing ourselves, but be the master of finding who we are, not getting lost, and be with the flow of the universe, so to speak. That's alignment. Okay, we use the word and the mind to communicate, appreciate the knowledge, the learning, discovery of the science or whatever, and make use of it. That itself is why we are as human beings with the brain to do that, but the brain has a limitation so that we don't lose the rest of what we are. Is this a random thought? I don't know. The state of being, finding the home, melting into nature, understanding what the universe is saying, and we are connected because we came out of that universe as a part of it, and the whole of it by itself, you can call a mini universe. Do we have a sense? Do we have a sense of home being there? And be the master of our destiny in our life. Aligned to the absolute. Okay, maybe there's a relative things that pops up, but let's not get lost. Many of things that pops up, good or bad, may not be necessary if we make a good judgment. And if we do that the life may be better simplified, clarified, then really we can be the master of who, who we could be, which is what we have already. So far as we have a connection and not losing it. Connection, the foundation, connecting to the foundation, and then see the world moving and changing and be the master. There's no identity of this master being because everything as it is what it is. And that's the peace we can find. That has been and that will be. Well, that's best I could do to summarize this random thoughts. The point is not get lost. It's okay to get lost, but come back to the main theme, which is the being. Because mind would give us all the stimulation to push us to the right or left, the wave analogy. But there's a great way of universe manifesting as it is. Before we are born, while we are alive, while we may die away, and keep on flowing. And that's the I am that I am. That's me, not the small me, but the big me being the universe. That could be seen as a very stupid random talk. And there may be many different ways to explain it by the use of the word God, or vast stillness, or emptiness, or nothingness, or the way, Tao, whatever, or way, no action. But there's action of the universe. Always and will be. Each moment. That's the foundation, that's the home. That's the source of our making a good choice. Not losing it. And so far as we are connected, as if there's a foundation, as the ocean or the core of our being, whatever pops up in our mind, we see it clearly. We should be able to find the way. That makes total sense. Let's find that, be peaceful, happy as we are. And face whatever the difficulties we may find. And make a good use of our connection to that source, so that we don't get lost as the mind moves and the scenery changes, because we have a foundation of connection which is absolute, not the scene that we see fluctuating in the mind.